Statutes serve as main source of law which have to be interpreted by judges. This is to understand the meaning and the intent of the legislature behind making the law. The literal rule of interpretation, which remains in use by judges worldwide, is the oldest and primary rule of interpretation. The rule says that words should be construed in their plain and ordinary meaning. Unless the purpose of the statute suggests otherwise, words must be understood in their typical and natural sense. Thus, the judges cannot go beyond the literal edges, that is, the literal meaning of the words. The rationale behind the literal rule is to ensure that courts do not render biased judgments and to create uniformity in their decisions. Lord Tyndall defined the literal rule as, if the words of the statute are in themselves precise and unambiguous, then no more can be necessary than to expound those words in their natural and ordinary sense. The words themselves alone do, in such a case, best declare the intention of the lawgiver. Some legal scholars also refer to the literal rule as the grammatical rule. In the case of R versus Harris, the defendant bit off the victim's nose. The statute mentioned to stab, cut, or wound to be an offense. The court held that under the literal rule, the act of biting did not come under the meaning of stab, cut, or wound. Therefore, the defendant was held not liable for biting. Fisher vs. Bell. In this case, the defendant displayed a flick knife with a price tag in his shop. The Offensive Weapons Act 1959 made it an offense to offer for sale certain weapons, including flick knife. The court held that the display of the knife with a price tag in the shop window was not an offer for sale but an invitation to treat. The court determined that the display of the knife was merely an invitation to treat and the actual sale would occur when a customer bought the item to the cash register and offered to purchase it. Thus, the court applied the literal rule by interpreting the word offer in the literal sense, thus acquitting the defendant. In the case of Lalita Kumari vs. State of Uttar Pradesh, the main question was the interpretation of Section 154 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. The court held that the use of word shall leaves no discretion to police officer to hold preliminary inquiry before recording an FIR. Use of the expression information without any qualification also denotes that the police has to record the information despite being unsatisfied by its authenticity. The literal rule is often criticized on various grounds: rigidity and inflexibility. The rule rests on the assumption that there is only one meaning for a particular word. This restricts the scope of deriving meaning from the context of the statute, which may result to unjust decisions. Absence of context. Laws are often part of larger legal framework, and interpreting them solely based on the literal meaning of words might neglect the overall purpose and objectives of the legal system. Absurd outcomes. Critics argue that the law should be interpreted to avoid irrational or nonsensical outcomes, and a strict literal approach might not always achieve this. Stay tuned for the video on Golden Rule of Interpretation.